Hello Internet and welcome to a new tutorial. In this tutorial I'm going to show you a robotic psychedelic lead that was heavily inspired by Kabayun from Sangoma Records. That doesn't mean that we're going to replicate one of his leads or something, it's just that the techniques and the character behind it were heavily inspired by his productions. Anyways, I'm going to demonstrate the techniques behind this tutorial using three different VSTs, Serum, Pigments and Helm, the free VST, while taking advantage of the different characteristics of each VST to add, let's say, a different taste to the sound while maintaining the same character or soul of the sound design. So with that said, let's start our tutorial. So here we have an initial patch of Serum, nothing too special as the usual. So what I'm going to do is first I'll draw a simple pattern to work with, something like this. And by the way, I think that's the first time I do this on my channel, which is using A as the base note of my of the tutorial. So anyways, we have this pattern, something like this. We're not going to make this like really fancy pattern, we just need something that'll work well with the track, and I think that this will work well. Let's listen to it. That should do the job. We can change it later anyways. So here in Serum, what I'm going to do is I'll create this really simple FM lead based on two saws, as I've already explained in my how to make screaming FM leads tutorial. Anyways, I'm going to choose the basic mini. And here I'll take off the random phase. I'll set the start point to 0 degree, just in here, like the starting phase. I'll take off oscillator B all the way down, and I'll make it modulate FM, oscillator A, like so. And I'll take it one octave down. So I have this pretty FM lead, like so. Great. Now, for the filtering, I'm going to choose Formant 1 filter. You can choose any Formant filter, but I'll stick to Formant 1 for now. I'll crank that resonance all the way up, almost all the way up. And I'll set the cutoff like to the minimum value in here. I'll leave the formant the way it is. I'll take my first telephone here and I'll make it modulate the cutoff, but I'll set it to something like, let's say 4 bars, something like this. So now we have this. And now I'm going to take off the sustain and leave it with like little decay, because I want the sound to be a bit plucky, something like this. This is really good. Now what I'm going to do is I'll go to my effects section in here and I'll add a phaser. Now I'll take off the depth. I don't want the internal LFO to modulate the frequency, but actually I want this LFO, which is modulating the cutoff, to modulate the frequency of the phaser. So what I'll do is I'll set the frequency to 18,000, just like so. I'll set the LFO in here and I'll make it modulate like so. I'll crank the feed a bit. Now we have this. And actually, if we don't like the sound like this, we can switch the modulation, just like so, the direction of the modulation. Both of them are really good. I just take off some of the feed. That's pretty good. And now what I'll do is I'll just click on the mix in here and give it some level, some decibels. That's pretty good. And now what I'll do is I'll add a delay. But in here, what we're going to do is we're going to link the left and the right channel. We'll take off the BPM. We'll set the delay to the lowest time possible, and we'll modulate that with the first LFO. But we're going to modulate just a tiny bit, so we won't go to extreme values because we're using the delay to add character to the sound. And now we have something like this. We'll add a bit more feedback. Now we have this. We get this kind of a flanger effect to the sound. We can give it even more feedback to get like more effect out of the sound of the delay. Actually, what we can do in here, let's go to value something like 60 milliseconds, and I'll make it modulate in the opposite direction. I'll have something like this. I will add some delay. And what I'll do is, with the equalizer, I'll take some of these nasty lower frequencies out. Now let's listen to what we have with the kick and bass. That's basically the main idea behind the sound design. Simple FM lead, 4-band filter, pass it through a phaser, and then a delay to add some character to the sound, and we'll end up with this. Now, what we can do now is to take Pigments. So let's initialize the preset. Let's take exactly the same pattern and loop it in here. Let me take off the first serum. So nothing too special, initialize patch. Now I'll take a wavetable in here in the synthesizers called MB2 Ultrasaw. I think it's based on their Mini Brute 2 Ultrasaw thing. Now we have this. So first of all, I'm going to do exactly the same thing. I'll take up the sustain, I'll leave some decay, fast attack, so we have, like a plucky sound. We have this. That's pretty good. Now what I'll do is I'll FM the Ultrasaw wavetable in here with another saw. So we have something like this. And as the usual, 1 octave minimum apart between, the carrier and the modulator. Now we have this. And now what I'll do to add a character and movement to the sound, I'll take the first telephone here, I'll set it to unipolar. I'll set it to something in between, like a sine and a triangle. I'll sync it to 104, and now I'll make it modulate the position of the wavetable. I'll set the reset source to free running, and now we have this. So we have like a slight movement in the sound, and I really like that. And the phase, I'll set it to 270, like this. Now we have this. It just adds just a tiny bit of movement to the sound, and I really like that. Now what we're going to do is I'll set a 4-man filter in here. I'll set the blend to almost 0, minus 120 decibels, and I'll modulate it with the first LFO, like so. So now we have this. The Q and the morph factor, you can play with them the way you like. I think like this, they're good, but you know, this is up to you. You can do whatever you like with them. Now, what I'll do is I'll copy the first filter to the second filter, but I'll take off the modulation of the first LFO, and I'll take the second LFO like so. I'll do exactly the same thing, but I'll set it to a faster rate, 2-on-1. I'll set the reset source to free running again, and I'll make it modulate the second filter like so. I'll set the filter mix to 50-50, filter 1, filter 2, and the routing to parallel, and now we have this. I forgot the second LFO should be on unipolar too. Now we have this. Maybe change the morph and the Q factor in here so we can get something a bit different without modulating. Maybe we can blend a bit of the signal with it. It's really up to you. Just the idea is to have 2 4-man filters on parallel mode. And different modulation going between the 2 filters. Maybe we can change the phase in here, by the way, to something like 90 degrees. That's pretty nice. Now, what I'm going to do in here, I'll set this, I'll go to the effects section in here, and I'll set the first effect to a phaser. Again, I'll take off the LFO modulation in here, and I'll modulate the frequency with the third LFO in here, because I'm going to leave it on bipolar. I'll set it to sync to binary, again, 4-on-1, something like in between a sine and a triangle. And I'll leave it on free running, and now it's going to modulate the frequency of the phaser in here. I'll crank that feed a bit up, like this, wet 100%. Now we have this. And I'll leave the pulse to 6. And just to add some movement to the sound, we can set the rate of the internal LFO of the phaser to binary 1/16. Set it to sample and hold, and make it modulate just a tiny bit so we can add some more movement to the sound. And to add a bit, again, more movement to the sound, I'll take the LFO3 and I'll make it modulate the panning of both filters, but just a tiny bit, something like 0.20%. Like so. And it should modulate, you know, the opposite way between the two filters. So we'll get different modulations going on. And now we have this. Yeah, the sound moves in the stereo field. And now, let's duplicate that a bit, like so. And let's add a delay in here. just so we'll get tiny bit more modulation and movement to the sound. I'll set the time to, I'll leave it to like seconds, like so. I'll set it to the minimum value possible. A bit dry and wet, a bit more feedback, like so. And I'll take the first telephone and make it modulate just a tiny bit. So now we have this. Now I'll give it some delay, like so, from my send channel in here. And let's see how will it sound with the kick and bass. It's not robotic anymore, actually, but you know, the idea behind the whole format filter is to get like a talking robotic thing. So anyways, let's see if we duplicate that, how will it sound with Helm, the free VST, and what will change. So anyways, let's load up Helm, like so. And so what I'll do is, okay, take off the delay that we've set in here, turn off this channel. Now we have this. Nothing too special. What I'll do is, the right oscillator, I'll set it to sine wave, and I'll cross modulate both oscillators. So what cross modulation here does is that the left oscillator will control the phase, will modulate the phase of the right oscillator, and the right oscillator will control the tone of the left oscillator. And I'll go to the mixer in here, I'll turn off the second oscillator. Now we have something like this that sounds like this. I'll change the transposition of the oscillator. I have this like gritty sound like that. So what we'll do in here, I'll turn on the filter, I'll take off the resonance, I'll set it to 24 dB per octave, and like so I can control the nasty higher frequencies like this. And now to get this robotic feeling to the sound, I'll turn off the Formant engine in here, and we'll have this now. Now what I'll do is, I'll modulate the Formant engine or filter in here with the two LFOs that we have in here, the mono LFOs that we have. So I'll take the first LFO, I'll make it modulate to the max. I'll take the second LFO, I'll make it modulate again to the max, and I'll set them, both of them, to 4 and 1, like so. And now we have this. Perfect. And for the phaser, I'm going to use this amazing phaser from Adam Cesapo called Phasor, like so. I think I've pronounced it well. And I'll just crank the feedback a bit, slower that rate, and now we have this. And I'll take off the sustain, exactly like I've done with the other sound designs. Some decay. Now I have this. And we can add a tiny bit of modulation with the delay. Again, exactly the same techniques. I'll take off the feedback a bit down. I'll set it to seconds. Again, I'll set it to the minimum possible value. I'll take one of the LFOs, make it modulate just a tiny bit. Now we have this. I'll just crank more feedback in here. I'll set the mix to 100%. And I'll just add an EQ in here to take off these nasty lower frequencies. And maybe I'll add a tiny bit of distortion in here just to add some higher frequencies. I'll use the signfold algorithm in here. Maybe the soft clip. Just a tiny bit. Now let's add some delay. And now let's see how well will it sounds like with a kick and bass. Maybe I can take it one octave up. It lost all of its grittiness. Maybe something like this. Yeah, that's way better. So now we have this. It's amazing how using the same techniques with 3 different plugins gave us 3 different sound designs, yet they share the same character. That makes any sense. So if we go again, here's the first sound design that we've made. Here's with Pigments. And with Helm. And with that, this is the end of our tutorial. I really hope you've liked it. I really hope you've learned something new. And if so, please hit the like and subscribe button. And have a great one.